Greetings and salutations, folks. I hope everyone is still doing well. And, folks, we are getting closer and closer to Saturday Nightmares, live from upstate New York, 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And this is today's second bonus. Before we jump into it, though, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's second bonus, shall we? All right, everyone. Today I have a subscriber with us. He is out of northeastern Pennsylvania. His name's Quinn. He had a Dogman encounter. I actually narrated on the channel a while back. Quinn, how are you today?
No, not too bad. How you doing, Jeff?
Doing well, doing well. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to share your experiences with us. I know you have Dogman and Bigfoot experiences.
Sure.
So I'm going to turn the mic over to you. Why don't you kind of let everyone know, you don't have to share exactly where you're from, but like lay the layout of the land for us so we all can kind of get a mental picture of where this kind of occurred and what happened. So the mic's yours, my friend.
Okay, Jeff, thanks a lot. I really appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate everybody for listening. My first experience, the only experience I had with a Dogman type creature, I was 5 years old. My father had just built a house on a new piece of property that was part of a farm in a very rural area in northeastern Pennsylvania. I'm actually in what's called the Slate Belt, and we weren't moved into the new house yet, and he was driving me to the property to catch the bus to go to school. Again, this was in 1975 in September. I was a kindergartner, and as we were coming, now I'm going to give you some orientation, like north, south, east, and west, because it's really hard to describe how this happened without giving some, directions.
Right.
So if you can picture, we're headed westbound, and it's a small country road. The property to the north had another road that was even a smaller country road that was gravel. So on the north, we were bordered by a small gravel road, and on the south, it was a county road, and that was paved. It was the beginning of September. Most of the foliage, everything had fallen off the trees. It wasn't super cold yet this year, but it was a very tepid September. As we were driving, westbound on the county road that actually was bordered to the front of our property where the driveway would meet it. There's a Y there where the backcountry road goes to the back of the property, and we're going straight. As we're driving, my father pointed out that he saw something really large and black off to our right hand side, which would be to the north. And and he pointed it out, and he asked me if I saw it or did I see that, and I said, yeah, Dad. He said there's something big and black over there on the side of the property. Well, he saw it before I did, and then I looked. When I looked, it had crossed the back gravel road and had stood up on the border of the fields, and it was trying to hide itself between two mulberry trees. They were on the border of the field with the back road there. Now, I want to just say this: it came down out of the woods, but the woods were where there were some retired slate quarries. This is the slate belt. So it wasn't really a mountain, but it was where all the refuse and stuff had been dumped, and the trees and everything grew up over it. And there was a guy that lived up there. He owned all three slate quarries. It was roughly about 100 acres of property from what I was told, but heavily wooded. So this large, black wolf came down off of this area from the woods, crossed the road on all fours, and then stood up in the fence row and tried to hide itself between two mulberry trees. The branch that was closest to the top of its head, my father and I ended up measuring it at a later time, obviously, but it was it was close to 12 feet. So when this thing, stood up, it was almost 12 feet tall. Just for reference, the animal did look like it had elongated front. It didn't look like it had paws. Its hands appeared. Well, I say hands because that is what it looked like. They were elongated. You could see that it looked like it had fairly large claws. So it dropped down on all fours again, and it ran across our field. Now it's coming southbound, we're going westbound, and our paths are going to intersect here. The animal ran with such an unbelievable amount of speed, Jeff. It crossed about 100 yards would have been the distance. We almost hit it. My father actually floored the car. He actually intentionally did try and hit the thing, because let me just tell you, my dad was a steel worker. He's an immigrant right off the boat. 5'8", about 225, solid muscle. I never, ever saw fear on this man's face when he looked at me after it ran across the road. I know he was afraid. First time in my life I ever saw fear in my dad's eyes.
Right. So
we were in old 1971 Matador station wagon from AMC. The thing was huge and couldn't get out of its own way, so we just barely missed hitting the animal. Now, when it came up to the road, I mean, I gotta stress this: the amount of speed that this thing had running across the field was, it was an amazing. It was almost unnatural, and it was jet black too. Just to let everybody know, the color of the thing was jet black all over, head, tail, everything. So when it ran in front of us, its left side would have been facing our car. The shoulder of the animal was roughly about a foot above the hood of the car. As it ran across the road, it turned its head toward us. It snarled, showing all of its teeth. Its canines were, to me, in my judgment, were close to 6 inches. The animal had an enormous head, and it kept, after it looked at us, showed its teeth. It was very scary. Let's put it that way. But it never stopped moving, and when it was across the road from nose to tail, it basically covered from one shoulder of the county road to the next, which we measured that too. That was approximately 20 feet. This animal was huge. The hood itself was about 3 feet tall off the ground. So this animal at the shoulder would have been about 4 feet. It had amber amber eyes, like a yellowish amber eye. And it was just unbelievably frightening to see this thing. Like I said, I never saw my father scared in his life, and I could tell he was frightened by what he saw, because we just built that. He just built a house there,
right.
and he's got a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and an infant. Excuse me. My throat's getting a little dry.
And a monster running on his property.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you. I mean, we both really did a double take. We're like, what the hell are we seeing?
Right.
And the thing had regular hocks, like a dog. It had a big long snout. The head of this thing, Jeff, must have been at least, like, from the nose to its ears. I mean, it must have been like 3 feet. It was enormous. Like I said, it was all inspiring to see it, and then terrifying at the same time.
Right.
But it had just ungodly speed and size to it. Now, I don't remember the timeline here really strictly, but it was within a couple days or a week or so, we ended up moving into this house. And by the way, my dad told me not to say anything to my mom. He's like, don't say anything to your mother. She's going to be scared to death. I got a stay-at-home mom raising me, and, 1 year, it was me, a year younger sister than an infant. So, and I said, okay, Dad, I won't say anything, blah, blah, blah. And I just couldn't help but think, like, a couple days before that, we were walking the property on foot. Like, what if this thing would have came down, out of the woods, off the slate quarries, while we were walking. And my father just kind of looks at me. He said, I don't know. He said, but it's really scary to think about. So, don't think about it too much if you can. So, I did my best to keep my game face on. I didn't tell my mom. So we moved into the house, and out in this area of the country, there was nothing there, Jeff. It was all farms, a house here or there. You could hear sound carry for miles, just a general somebody having a conversation on their porch half a mile up the road. You just heard noises very clearly because they just traveled around in the countryside. So, plus this guy was up higher than where my house was. He was up on top of the refuse piles. It wasn't a mountain height, but it was, quite a bit higher than where our house was, elevation wise. So we got like an Indian summer after we had moved in. We had the windows open at night, and again, I remember if this was a day or two or a couple days. I don't think it was longer than a week. I think it was like just a few days. So we're moved in. My father's working third shift. I used to work at Ingersoll Rand. He's working, third shift, and he's about a half-hour drive away. And the one night, we're in bed. The windows are all open. I had to get up for school the next day, obviously. And the next thing you know, like World War III breaks out. It was gunshot, actually. I'll be clear about it. It was a shotgun. He had a 12 gauge. I mean, he was just letting loose with a 12 gauge. And he had about a dozen guard dogs up there. I don't remember the mixture of the dogs, but 1975, Dobermans were popular, guard dogs, shepherds, and Rotties and stuff like that. I don't know what he had, but I know he had about a dozen dogs, because there was always people trespassing on his property. Kids would go try. One quarry hole had a beach even. Kids would go swimming back there, without his permission. There were accidents, unfortunately. A couple people did drown over the years because they fell into one of these holes that was, retired, and they never knew that they were there, and so forth. So, he tried to keep trespassers away, and these, a lot of dogs, and they were pretty pretty vicious. You can hear them barking here and there, but I got to tell you this is the part that I have a hard time keeping out of my head. I mean, they were just getting slaughtered. I mean, you heard the dogs growling, barking, you know. You didn't hear, oddly enough, I don't remember hearing any kind of, you know, growling or anything that I thought would have come from that animal. Mm-hmm. It's possible it did. It's possible it did growl, but there was just all hell breaking loose. You know, and between the shot that he's letting loose with the I would find out later, you know, 12-gauge shotgun buckshot. But his poor dogs were just getting, I mean, slaughtered. To hear them getting eviscerated like that was just awful. So my mom, you know, of course, is in panic mode right now. She calls the police. Now, where we lived, very rural. We had one township cop that was on duty during the day, and in the evening, the state police took second and third shift. So the state police are the ones that showed up. You know, the cruisers went up his little road up the top of the hill where he lived, and my mom called my father at work, and you know, of course, you know, frantic over what was happening, and you know, my dad didn't come home early, but he came home at his normal time because the cops were there and everything was settled down at that point. So my father came home the next day in the morning, his usual time, and he went. He informed us. My mom kept me home from school, by the way. He informed us that he's going to go over and talk to we just call him the hermit to keep it simple. Up on the Slate Quarry Hill, he's going to go talk to the hermit and see what happened. So, he starts walking across our field to go to the guy's driveway to go up and see what ended up happening. So he as he's walking down there, I'm tagging along, but he let me, as soon as we got to the edge of the property, he wouldn't let me go up. He made me go back to the house. So he disappears, walks up the hill. Some kind of tactical team showed up from the Pennsylvania State Police. It was, I guess, their version of their SWAT team or something like that. They were parked on the road, and I don't know if they couldn't get their vehicles up the hill because the road was winding and really narrow. I think some of them might have gone up, but very shortly after that, they landed their helicopter in our field. Some time went on and so forth, and then a lot of small arms fire. You could tell it was, I'm older now knowing what I know because I grew up hunting, fishing, shooting. These were definitely high-power rifle shots versus a shotgun. And, my dad ended up coming, before that happened, before my dad came back down the hill to the house, the helicopter took off. It hovered up over the gentleman's property. It lowered some kind of a net, with some kind of grappling hooks or whatever. And when it finally ended up taking off, and there was something pretty large, and the net was covered up with tarpaulins or whatever. Something big was hanging in the net when they took off, and they flew away with it. My father ended up coming back down to the house, and again, it's early in the morning. He just worked third shift. He comes and sits us down. He said, "Listen, the police said we shouldn't really talk about this." And of course, I'm 5 years old. I'm like, "Dad, what's going on? What happened?" My mom is like, my mom was actually really angry about the whole situation because she's scared to death, and they weren't telling us what the hell was going on and so forth. So my dad said, he said, "Well, they shot and killed a very, very, very large wolf." And I said, "Dad," I said, "is that the one that we saw the other day?" And he said, well, it came down off this property. I'm going to say it was the one, we saw the other day. But truthfully, we really didn't know. We didn't even know that one was there, let alone if there's more up there. Because the quarry holes were filled with fish. For some reason, they get fish in them. I mean, big, huge bass and so forth. And, so there was a food source besides fish, deer, a lot of white-tailed deer in the area, tons of cornfields. They were big, fat deer. Oddly enough, my dad would make a comment that, he didn't really see too many deer running around as fall came when he was finishing working on the house. So that was a little strange coincidence. But, now this might have been the reason why this thing was harvesting probably most of what was around because of how big it was. But, so he said that. So we're sitting down at the table, and he said that, he saw them shooting a really large wolf, and that we were asked not to talk about it and so forth. And then he also said, that there were 12 gauge spent shotgun shells everywhere, Jeff, everywhere. And the gentleman lost about 9 of his 12 dogs. They were killed pretty much instantly. They were, ripped to shreds. That's what he would. He didn't get too graphic because you got to remember I'm only 5 years old at this point. He said that they were just all torn apart. The dogs that survived were, injured to a degree too. He didn't really go into detail about that, but he had that look in his eye again. He's like, you could just tell it frightened him. And the only time I ever saw fear in the man's eyes, I mean, I'm now 52, he's 74. I tried to bring it up to him one other time, when I was, probably in my teens, before college, about, us seeing this thing, and he kind of blocked it out, in my opinion. He didn't comment or acknowledge that I was, that I was asking him about this. He said something like, you're talking about that black wolf thing. And I said, yeah, Dad, it's like, things like, he shut it down. He didn't want to talk about it. So I knew right then and there that was, that was something that really got to him,
right,
and really frightened him. But, I got to tell you, hearing those dogs get ripped to shreds was awful.
Now,
it was awful.
From your house to this guy's property, how far would you say it was?
Okay, from our house to the guy's property, so that would be northbound. To his property, it was probably less than 100 yards to where his property started off the road.
Oh.
Now, to go up the hill on top of the refuse piles where he lived, again, I want to clarify, the Woods reclaimed these slate quarries because they were unused for a long, long time. So it's not that he's just living on a slate ref. It's all wooded at this point.
Right.
And I would say maybe 100 yards total to where his house was on top of the hill. But his property started right across the street from our property, and there was a creek that was fed by the springs coming out of the slate quarries. So, it was relatively close. And again, out in the country where we were, it was like a concert hall sound, unfortunately. It was really unnerving. It was really unnerving. I still sometimes get PTSD when I talk about this because I got on a story. My son my wife is a mental health therapist, and she had a piece of corrugated pipe about 4 inches, and accordions open and closed. My son was playing with that actually it was only about 6 months ago, and he came up behind me as I was sitting in the chair at the table, and he growled into this thing, and it amplified it, so much. It triggered me. I started shaking and sweating, and I immediately turned around and knocked the chair over, and I was looking around for something to be there. And I said, Angela, please don't. He's like, Dad, are you okay? You okay? And I said, yeah. I said, it just reminds me of a really bad experience I had, one time. But, it's not something, if I could wish that it didn't happen, I would.
Right.
Because it's not something, oh my God, to hear those dogs, to hear those animals his dogs get slaughtered like that.
Yeah. After the slaughter happened, did you ever talk to the old guy after, or did your family talk with him ever?
Well, my father had gone up there the morning after everything happened. He saw all the dead dogs and the ones that were injured and so forth. Now, if you're asking me, like, after that initial encounter happened, did we ever associate with him again after that?
Yeah.
You know what? Not really. And he was a hermit for a reason. He lived up there on his own. I don't know what the story was, honestly. He wasn't a real friendly, talkative guy.
Okay.
He would wave if you saw him on the road. If you're walking and he'd see it, he'd wave, but that's really about it. I mean, he never came over to talk to my father or say hi to or anything like that. And we never went over to visit him. He isolated himself from everybody. And, he had the property's a beautiful property, but, he was always in the process of fighting, keeping trespassers away. I'm guilty of going swimming in those quarry holes too. Not the one where the beach was at, but that's the one, but not the other one. The other ones had sheer drop-offs, hundreds of feet. So, a couple people drowned over the years because they trespassed and they did, they poked their nose around where they shouldn't have been, and they fell in these holes and drowned. But no, he was not a friendly guy, and he I don't even know how old he lived to. He did eventually pass away. But he stayed, he was a recluse, I guess. He was just really reclusive.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I couldn't imagine, your dad just being freaked out, you seeing your dad freaked out in the car, and then I can't imagine his demeanor coming back after going up there and seeing the carnage of these dogs, being shredded. It must have been horrific for your dad to see, and his whole attitude must have just been, really off-putting, knowing that, hey, we just built this house here, I'm working. My wife's a stay-home mom, and my kids are young.
Third shift too. Working third shift as him.
Yeah, God, that must have been horrifying.
Yeah, he definitely was shaken. He put a game face on for us kids and his wife, but he definitely was shaken up, and when you look at your dad, I was 5 years old. My dad was Superman.
Yeah.
He was my hero. So later, I wanted to just bring this up too. It's like later that night, I was supposed to be in bed, but I heard my parents talking. My dad and mom were talking a little bit further about it, and he was telling my mom a little bit more details, about what happened up there. He didn't get into the gore with me. I heard it from him, talking to my mom, and of course I'm supposed to be sleeping, but no, I'm eavesdropping because I'm only the next room over from their bedroom.
Right.
You know, and he just told my mom, you know, that the dogs were literally ripped apart. You know, that the guy actually was, you know, he was practically ready to be committed at this point. My dad said he wasn't even coherent. He couldn't even talk coherently. You know, that's how scared he was. And he was letting loose with his 12 gauge out one of his windows. You know, I don't know how well the property was lit up because I was never up there. I was a little kid at night. So, but my father said, you know, he was just blasting away. You know, he said there were just shells everywhere, spent shotgun shells.
Wow.
And, you know, the dog, you know, he told my mom, you know, flat out the dogs were ripped apart, and, you know, it was very scary. There were loaded shotguns the next day at you know, the back door and the front door, you know, with double Magnum buckshot. I could tell you that much. And, you know, he got my mom a handgun, you know, for her to give her if came to shove. And, you know, I'll tell you this much: he wasn't on third shift very long after this happened.
Right.
You know, my mom was like, you got to get off third shift. I can't be alone with something like this, you know, going on. Who could blame her? You know?
Yeah.
Who could blame her? But, you know, thank God, Jeff, like I said, I think about, you know, that all the time. Is, you know, we were walking around on that property just a couple days beforehand. Geez, I don't even want to think about what the outcome would have been like if that thing ran down into us on foot.
Wow. I mean, that's... And the thing is when you, and I kind of want to emphasize this,
sure,
because, you know, for people that are hearing this, you know, you said from head tip of the nose to tip of the tail, it was, you know, 20 feet long. But when you and your dad saw this thing, that was when it was standing bipedal, your dad measured that branch, you and your dad, and it was 12 feet tall. This was just, this thing was a monster of a Dogman. It was just absolutely gigantic.
There's no other way to describe it. It was freaking gigantic. I mean, you know, the county road, it was a small two-lane county road, you know, no yellow line in the middle, but it had the fog line on both sides, you know, and like I said, from tip of the nose to tip of the tail, it went from shoulder to shoulder on the county road. Jeff, it was enormous. It's like I said, its canines had to be 6 inches. They were huge. They were huge.
Yeah. Wow.
The thing's head was enormous. I mean, it's 4 foot. It's roughly, like I said, he took a measurement. The car was like 3 feet. The top of the hood and the shoulder was about a foot above that. I mean, 4 foot at the shoulder. This animal was.
Those dogs stood no chance.
Yeah, I mean, they sure didn't.
I mean, the way you described the head just, you know, it's almost like the head of this creature was the size of one of those dogs almost, you know. It was
huge.
It's an incredible experience. Wow, I cannot imagine being a father, you know, and you being a dad now. I can't imagine the amount of fear and regret, you know. I mean, there's gotta, you know what I mean? Like, I can't believe we just built this house here. I don't have money to move. We got to live this out. You know, it's just, that's terrifying.
Yeah. It was terrifying. Trust me. And, you know, to compound matters. Okay. The barracks commander from the local state police barracks, right in the same, you know, he talked to my dad and he said, you know, I'm going to come down and talk to you after this is all cleared up here. And, you know, he came down and my mom, you know, made him coffee and they sat down and talked and stuff like that. And, of course, I'm a little kid. I got shushed off into the room, but I have big ears.
Yep.
And he told my father in no unspoken terms. He said, it just would be better if you never talked about this again. Just don't ever bring it up again.
Right.
We took care. The animal was, like I said, when my dad went up there was a tactical team that had arrived. Small arms fire broke out, which again, now as an adult, I know the difference between a high power rifle report and a shotgun. They were definitely high power rifle rounds. I don't know how many rounds it took to kill the thing, but I could tell you this, they did unload on it.
Yeah.
There was quite a bit of gunfire. Wow. So, and then my dad, he said that they killed a very, very large wolf. So, he actually saw them shoot it when he was up there.
That's incredible. It is incredible.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the constitution that man, I can't even imagine. Yeah, I mean, because he had to be strong for me, because I saw the thing with him, and, his wife, who was terrified, me also now after that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I was, I guess maybe, it didn't quite tear me to pieces, at that age, because, it was still really surreal to me.
Yeah, it's almost like you're not registering it, It's
I couldn't have said it any better myself. That's exactly what I was thinking. That type of, it was like, oh wow, it was a huge wolf, and it killed 9 guard dogs, and they shot it with like however many rounds it took to kill it. The guy that owned the hermit that owned the property, like I said, I mean, my dad said, like, he was not even close. He was like not coherent when he was up there. And how could you blame the guy?
Yeah.
There was some huge black wolf tearing, just tearing your dogs to pieces. And I guess, he was shooting out the window to try and hit this thing. I don't even know if he hit it. My dad didn't know either, but I don't even know if he hit the thing. I mean, he probably did, because he's just shooting everywhere in the dark, and where he's hearing noises and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't imagine what he went through. And my dad, like I said, he had to keep a game face on, and with me, it didn't. You're right. I think that's how I would put it. That it kind of didn't register out the serious. It was very surreal at the time.
Yeah.
But when I started, getting into reading stuff about cryptids on YouTube, and I came across your channel primarily is what is where I learned what I had actually seen. And this was about 7 years ago, so I'm like 45 at the time. And when I'm reading, the research and the reports and the interviews, when I realized that this is what my father and I had seen, and I mean, I got PTSD from it. I mean, I was shaking, I was sweaty, the hair was standing up on the back of my head. I kind of relived it to a minimal amount, but it's still enough. It scared the shit out of me.
Yeah. Why wouldn't it? I mean, I remember when I narrated that, and I thought about how your dad felt and how your family felt. But I remember thinking about the old guy, the hermit, and I was like, this poor man literally went through hell one night, lost his dogs, but then had to endure, watching this tactical team. So, they never in a million years would you ever guess that this would happen. This tactical team come and kill this enormous creature on your property. I mean, definite PTSD, and it's almost and then he had to endure it mentally for, however long he lived after that is almost unbelievable. I really was like, wow, this guy really went through hell multiple times within a 24-hour period of time.
Yeah, you got that right.
Too many wars, pretty much.
Yeah, and again, the guy was an older guy. Again, he was a hermit. I wish I could give you more information, about him or what happened to him after the incident, but I just can't, because number one, like I said, he wasn't friendly with anybody. He kept to himself. He was very reclusive. He never came over our house for a cup of coffee. He never invited, my parents over for a cup of coffee. He'd see you on the road when he drove down off the hill he lived, off the hill he lived on, and he'd wave, but that's it. He wasn't a real social person. I mean, I don't even know if he had any family that was kids or anybody that was able to come and help him get through this or whatever, because I didn't notice any different cars or people or hear anything, really. So I don't even know what happened. What happened to the guy after all this went down. I mean, I know he's long dead as of now. He was an old man back then. So yeah. I honestly wish I could give you more information on that, but again, like, the whole thing was somewhat surreal to me because of my age, and
absolutely,
and after learning about what I saw by listening to the videos and the research he had done on this topic, it hit me, because it's something I kind of shelved in my mind for a long time.
Yeah, it's amazing what our brains do to cope with, things. We really stuff things away and forget about it, until we have that reminder or whatever. It could be, just maybe you seeing a shotgun shell one day could have brought it up, or something, and it's incredible that our brain deals with stress and trauma that way. And then it's almost like, once you realize that happened, holy crap, that really did happen, you're in instant PTSD going, wow, that was real. That really was a monster, and it's scary. It is scary.
Well, like I said, I tried bringing it up to my father, years after that, to give you some, idea. I mean, rural area, I would learn how to shoot when I was knee high to a grasshopper, fish, hunt, all that stuff. Going through life, and my dad and I used to shoot high power rifle competitively as a father and son team, doing these kinds of things. Nothing ever, hunting, the gunfire, nothing triggered me more than reading the research and understanding finally what I saw. Now, I'm glad my dad made a good decision. I'm not too macho to say that. I'm glad he didn't let me go with him, because I don't know, as a 5-year-old kid, if I would have seen all those dogs with their bowels all torn out all over the place, their heads all, decapitated, torn apart. I loved animals. We had dogs. That probably would have really screwed me up.
Yeah.
And then all the high power rifle fire to kill the animal, I mean, he made a really good decision. He made a really good decision. And as far as my dad goes, I mean, I got to give him kudos for having the brassest balls out of anybody I know to keep his, he had to keep that game face on. He couldn't show fear. I only got a glimpse of fear from being in the car when he looked at me and I looked at him, and we realized, holy shit, we are seeing this,
Yeah.
And then after, he came down when my mom questioned him about what he saw up there, and he had a little fear in his eyes at that point too, even though it was dead. But like I said, Jeff, we didn't know this guy owned 100 acres of raw woods.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know what else was up there. We didn't know if there were more of these things.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking with your dad, thinking, okay, they got this one, but what the hell else is up in those woods?
Well, we didn't know at the time. We did not know. The only thing, like I said to you, the odd part was my dad had made a comment that going into the fall, when the house was being finished, he just thought it was funny we didn't see a lot of white-tailed deer, because we had a 5-acre field, which had, at the time, I don't know if it had corn in it or if it was just alfalfa, but he made a comment that we weren't really seeing a whole lot of deer in the field, or crossing from, like I said, cornfield across the street, woods. I can't remember. I think our field was hay at this time, but it was part of a truck farm at one time, so there were all kinds of berries. They never tilled the bushes under, so we had raspberries, mulberry trees, black raspberries, red raspberries, boysenberries, blackberries, strawberries, blueberry bush, you name it. We would have thought the deer would have been all over eating these berries and stuff like that, but he made a comment, and it was odd. We didn't see a lot of deer running around.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, we never, thank God, there was never another incident, at least to my knowledge,
right?
Involving one of these things. But it was big enough and strong enough and fast enough that I don't think anything could have ever muscled it out of its territory. Let's put it that way.
Right.
It's just, we were just in awe that something like this actually existed, or even let alone living across the street.
Yeah.
But that it even existed. It was a really rude awakening to the fact that human beings aren't the top of the food chain.
No, definitely not.
But that was pretty much a wrap on that. And again, I tried to get my dad to comment on it in later years. And he just kind of was like, oh, that was that black wolf thing or whatever. And he just shut right there. He said a couple of words. That was all that was about that black wolf thing, and shut right down. And that was it. And he refused to talk about it. He didn't say, I'm not talking about it. He shut me down after he said that, and that was it. So I knew it bothered him.
Right. Absolutely.
But
we're coming on some time. We got about 20 minutes left.
Okay.
I know you got a Bigfoot experience or something like that. You had told me.
Yeah, absolutely. I got 2 of them, and I'll make these quick for you if that's what you want.
Yeah, I want to hear them definitely.
Okay, the first one, we did not see the Sasquatch. Okay, my father and I was about probably about 13 or 14. And I was older than that, about 16. So we're talking about 1986 in Carbon County, northeast Pennsylvania, Carbon County. We were hunting on an 86-acre piece of land that my aunt, my father's sister, had bought, and it was virgin woods yet. It was like a rectangle, picture a rectangle. So it was on a country road. There was no shoulder to speak of. So we just had to pull over and get out of the car. And it was like a little incline just to get up on the property. And then it was fairly steep climb up the mountain. On top of the ridge, though, was a Pennsylvania State game land. So we were walking. We got out of the car. It's about 4:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. We both have our quintessential Pennsylvania deer rifles. I had a Marlin 30-30. My dad had his Marlin 35. We both had our Ruger 44 Magnum sidearms, and we were walking in the middle of pitch blackness. There was nothing out there, no light of any kind. And I know you're kind of familiar with being out in the country, Jeff. I mean, where there's no light pollution from any city or anything like that, I mean, it's black. Yeah. I mean, just black. So as we were walking, now it was a pretty cold deer season. There was a lot of deadfall on the ground, a lot of dead leaves, the deciduous leaves from the oak and the maple, crunch, crunch, crunch on, how that goes under your feet. If you step on a dead limb when it's really cold like that, a dead tree branch, it snaps with authority.
Yeah, it's loud.
It's loud as hell. So, we're walking along, and I said to my father, I said, Dad, I said, I hear something to our left rear of us, off to the left, but to the rear. Because he's walking in front of me and I'm walking behind him. It's slow going. There's lots of rocks, a lot of dead tree limbs. Like I said, it's virgin wilderness. And he said he didn't hear it because it was kind of windy. At first when we started, initially started the walk at the bottom, it was windy. So I said, okay, maybe I'm hearing things. Now we have black bear, and there was a big black bear boar that was seen on this property, and he was huge. But anybody that knows anything about bears, they walk very silently. They're very quiet.
Yeah.
And this thing was definitely on 2 feet. You could hear the spacing. A footfall. So I heard it again. And I said, Dad, did you hear that? This thing? He goes, no, not really. And I said, something is ghosting us. It's behind us to the left. And I said, here's what I want to do. I said, I took both our flashlights and I looked ahead just to see where we could go that wasn't too full of obstructions. So I said, Dad, you got to humor me here. Let's run like 10 or 20 feet. Stop, but run and stop. Something's definitely coming up behind us here. So we ran about 20. He placated me, and we ran about 20 feet, and we stopped. Okay. The footfalls behind us did not stop when we stopped. So my little trick worked. And he said, now I hear it. And somewhere along the line, a pretty thick dead tree branch was stepped on, and it had to be a big thick one, but whatever stepped on it had to be really heavy, like, to boot, because it sounded like a bomb going off. I mean, it was very loud. So my father obviously heard that, and I said, Dad, there's something really big coming up on us over here. So he's like, well, what do you want to do? And he looked a little concerned, but not very. He was still trying to push it off he was like, it's just a bear. And I kept telling him it wasn't a bear, but, so there were 3 trees in the area that were real close, that were right next to where we were at. So I said, let's go over there, put our backs up. But there's a tree in the middle, can't get through here. You stand back here with your back against this tree, and I'll stand with my back against the other tree. We'll face ourselves down the way this thing is coming, and it could have been a person. He said, it could be a person who's looking to rob us or something like that, which I never thought of. But I said, you know what? There's no freaking way that was a person that stepped on that branch, because you could tell, Jeff, was way too big and thick the way it broke.
Right.
It was extremely loud. No human being would have been able to to do that. So I said, I'm going to call out. There's nothing else left to do. So I drew my 44 Magnum, and I said to my dad, I said, you're better off having your 44 Magnum at the ready. It's more powerful than the rifles that we had, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I called out. I said, hey, is there anybody there? You know, and the footfalls didn't stop. I said, oh, please stop and now announce yourself. You know, we're armed. We don't want any trouble. We don't want anybody to hurt. We don't want to hurt anybody. We don't want to get hurt. You know, could you please call out and tell us who you are? This is private property. We have a relative that owns it. We're allowed to be here. You're not. So please stop and call out. That didn't do it either. So after I got done, you know, saying my little spiel there to try and get the person to speak up, which I got to be honest with you, Jeff, I was hoping it was a person at this, you know, even though there's no way it was, because how loud that tree branch broke. So then something really scary happened. The footfalls went from a slow walk to an all-out run. You know, a full bore run. Mm-hmm. And you could tell whatever was coming through the woods was huge. I mean, it sounded like a bowling ball. What a bowling ball would sound like if you were whipping it through the woods. I mean, it was, you know, there was all kinds of things breaking. You could hear things in. So I said, Dad, I'm gonna let a round go. So he said, aim it high so you don't kill someone. So, you know, I had my 44 Magnum out. I aimed not quite treetop height because I didn't want it to go too far. And I ripped off a round from my 44 Magnum, my Ruger Red Hawk 44 Magnum. The footfalls stopped. And I said, please stop or announce yourself. You know, I was really, you know, announce yourself. I just shot a bullet in the air at you, you know. And the footfalls didn't stop, but they stopped, but they didn't start going back toward us again. When, you know, after I let the shot go, they came to a stop, and then I tried to get them to call out again, and they didn't. And I said, okay, you know, you're going to, you know, we're armed, you're going to get shot if you keep pursuing us. And they actually, you know, ended up going the other direction. I guess they figured that, you know, they didn't want to tangle with us at that point since we met, you know. But, you know, it was, I could tell you whatever it was definitely thinking it over, like what to do, because it didn't turn around and run away right away. Right. You know, I was asking for somebody to call out, please announce yourself, because we didn't want to hurt anybody and we didn't want to get hurt. But I'm positive that had to be a Sasquatch because of the noise of the branch when it was broken, just the heavy footfalls. I mean, maybe I could be incorrect, maybe it wasn't, but it was bipedal for sure. And from what I know about bears, they're quiet, you know, so no human being either, unless they were Andre the Giant, maybe. Right. Could have stepped on a branch like that, but that was the first Sasquatch encounter. It's nothing it was hair raising at the time. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you're something's there, and you know something's there. So.
Yeah, it was scary. It was scary at the time, and you know, you kind of laugh at yourself, you know, a little bit, you know, because you have to make yourself feel a little better, feel a little bit more, you know, like, you know, you don't want to sound like, you know, you were scared shitless, but you really were, you know.
Absolutely.
This is the second Sasquatch encounter I have. That this one is pretty scary, actually. So at this point, I'm 22. That's 1992, and my Bedford County, west of Towanda, about 20 minutes. And it's 350 acres, and it's right off of Route 220. It runs straight up the mountain. Again, you can picture it as a rectangle, basically. It's not quite that pure of a shape, but from the county road, it goes all the way up the mountain to where the state game lands are at in this area too. It was logged out quite a while ago, and so they were logging. There were skidder roads everywhere where they logged out the valuable hardwoods and stuff like that. So my current my mom's brother was the legacy to own the property from his uncle, but my great uncle, my mom's great uncle, so to speak. I'm trying not to confuse everybody. We have such a big family, but anyway, so the lodge is like it's like a Viking lodge. It's cinder block, modern. It looked like a military barracks. It was, like 100 feet by 40 feet, a big cinder block building. You walked in, you had a mud room where, of course, there were beer meisters everywhere. It's deer camp.
Right.
First day of deer camp in PA. You get drunk and play poker all night long.
Yeah.
So I really was never a big drinker. But I did play a lot of cards. So we have a couple work weekends, one in the spring and one in the fall. So I had gone up and participated in the work weekends. So my room, my meals were all free for participating in the work weekend. And if you did them both, you got free board, for the first week of deer season. So if you did them both, you got free room and board for the first week with your food. So, my uncle, we went, I don't know, it's a mile or two, straight up the mountain, and then the first branch off where the logging road is, the first one you come to, and you go all the way. You know what? I'm sorry, I don't know distances, but I went I went probably about 2 miles total from the cabin. Okay. Up the mountain and then across the property. So say north first and then west to the end of the logging road. My uncle had 2 deer stands. He had one there and he had another one that was about another half a mile up the ridge. So he thinks he's building skyscrapers here. This deer stand, Jeff, is like 20 feet off the ground. No kidding. At your feet. Okay, and it's in the crotch of a birch tree that has 3 prongs to it. Okay, so I tied my gun up to the rope that you pull it up with, so you don't shoot yourself. And I climb up in this thing, and it's still dark, mind you. So on the logging road side, it's like 20 feet off the ground, but on the opposite side where it goes over the ridge, it's like 50 feet off the ground because there's like a kind of a real good drop off right there. Mm-hmm. So I'm up in this thing, and this thing, I feel like I'm on a damn amusement ride because it was very windy. Okay. And this thing is just shoving me around, it's moving one way, moving the other way, moving this way. And I'm like, I got to get off this damn thing. I'm going to get thrown out of the deer stand and get killed because I'm going to get thrown out of the deer stand, which happens. A lot of people do die from falling out of their deer stands, mm-hmm. And this was very windy and I was sober. I was 100% sober. Didn't even have, I don't think, anything to drink the night before. Was just playing cards. And, so I tied myself to one of the offshoots around my waist, so at least I wouldn't get thrown off the damn deer stand. But it was like I felt like I was on the ocean, and I'm like, I don't get motion sickness, but this was more annoying than anything. So I lowered my rifle and I climbed back down. I was told, by the board, or the old, we used to call them the old guys, the ones that were the board and everything that kept everything running, paid the bills and kept the property that at the end of the logging road on that side of the property, that would have been the east side of the property, there was like another 100 yards till you got to the boundary of the next hunting lodge's property. And, there were posted markers. So you'll see posted markers. You'll see, oranges. They had the barriers on trees where you could see where it ended. It was either posted signs or ribbons, or I forget exactly. But now this is all like virgin forest. So I'm walking. I'm going to say northeast. So I went up the ridge as well as across the ridge to the east a little bit. So I'm going like northeast, and it's virgin woods. I mean, the rhododendrons are 12 feet tall. There's mountain laurel all over the place. The coniferous trees are, the temperature and the light coming in was actually, I'm having a brain fart here how to put this. The light coming in from the sun was actually inhibited because the trees were everything was so thick. You know what I mean? Yep. So the temperature dropped. It was a little cooler in this area. It was a little darker. I mean, it felt kind of creepy, and I had to bushwhack a little bit too. As I'm going through, there's vines and sticker bushes and all that kind of stuff. The bush that the guy made Velcro from those little things that stick. You know what I'm talking about? They stick all over you.
Yeah.
So I finally got to a place where I felt comfortable. I saw a couple of deer trails, and there was a big tree. Now, the deer trails were going up the mountain to the north, and then one wide to the east and one wide to the west. And if you can picture above the letter Y, there was a big tree. And I sat my ass down right out in front of that big tree, and I was about 20 or 30 feet from where both of these trails emerged, out of the brush. As I'm looking down the mountain in my ride, I had my 30-06 with me with 180 round nose. That's what I brought because I was going to be in the brush. So I didn't bring a more ballistic tip bullet or higher power shell. But if I would have known what I known, I would have had my 7mm Magnum with me, for this incident. But hindsight's 20/20.
Right.
So I looked through my scope. I saw some deer coming up. They crossed the road and were going to come up the mountain. There was about 6 or 7, and there was a nice big buck in there, and the does were leading the way. And as I just I got patient, I had deer lure, buck lure. I don't know if you ever used that if you ever went hunting and you used buck lure.
No,
but it's basically doe piss.
Yeah.
Excuse my language. I inadvertently kicked it and knocked it over, and I stunk like a skunk. I mean, I had it all over my boots and everything like that. And the wind, interestingly enough, I was down the mountain was down when the wind was coming down over the ridge. So I'm like, oh boy, the deer are going to catch my scent. So I was like, hopefully not with all this buck lure all over the place. And that stuff stinks. It really does.
Yeah.
So which would have been more the more easterly branch of the Y, to my left, the first couple doe emerged. They came out from the brush, and I'm sitting there. I'm a left-handed guy, so with a right-handed rifle. So I'm just slowly, because I couldn't afford to buy a left-handed rifle at the time, So, I'm easing safety off, getting my eye up to the scope to take aim. And I had like a sniper setup. I had open sights underneath the raised mounts for the scope. And I went down to open sights then because she was getting a lot closer. I'm like, okay, come on, stick your head out. I'm waiting for the buck to come out. One doe comes out, 2 does come out, 3 does come out. they stop and they start snorting and digging at the earth and, making, just making a racket. They turn around and, like a Jeff bat out of hell, go flying back down the mountain. So I put my scope up. It was about 300 yards plus. I put my scope up just to watch to see if the buck came out. He did. I put it about 2 feet above his head, or I should say his antlers. I ripped the shot off, but it hit the dirt right behind him. The bullet was too heavy and not fast enough for that kind of distance. Hence is where I said I wish I would have had my 7mm Magnum, because I would have dropped them. That thing was very long and flat shooting. So I'm sitting there, and I rechambered around just in case just in case. So I'm sitting there, and it dawned on me that the does that came out to my left weren't looking at me. It just kind of hit me. I'm like, wait a minute, they weren't even looking at me, but I thought they smelled me, because they started digging the earth, snorting and clawing at the earth and all that kind of stuff. I thought the jig was up.
Right.
But I was just thinking about it and how they acted and everything like that. And I'm like, something isn't right here, because they weren't looking at me. They were looking over my left shoulder. And so I craned my neck around the tree I was sitting against. Behind me, at an angle, again, to like the northeast a little bit, there was a stand of big pine trees. And as soon as, I turned around and I'm looking at something, I'm not sure what I'm seeing here. But there was a dark reddish, brownish leg that was obstructed in the pine trees. You could see from the knee down to the foot. I'm not sure which leg it was, but I knew it was a Sasquatch right away, because what else would it be? It's, I'm sitting on the ground, and this thing's knee is higher than the top of my head. I didn't smell anything. But again, I was downwind from, he was downwind from me. I was downwind from him. I'm sorry. No, I was downwind from him. I didn't smell anything. People say that they get like a real nauseating stench or something when they're around these things. I didn't smell that at all. I didn't smell it. Jeffrey, you still there?
Yeah, I'm listening.
I'm sorry. Something went wacky on my phone here. I didn't smell anything, but again, it was very, very windy. Its hair was, you could see it was blowing around a little bit from the wind, and it had like a nice, like a golden glisten to it and everything like that. And Jeff, I got to tell you, this thing's leg looked like it was almost as thick as the friggin' tree trunk. I mean, it was enormous. It was very large.
Right.
All I could see was a basic shadow, up in the trees and where it was hiding. And like I said, I only saw the side of its leg from like the knee down. And I don't know how big it was or how it got there. It could have been there already. I don't know if he was sleeping there and I didn't see him there because I came out in the dark, or if he snuck down the mountain, looking for food.
Right. Because
I know that there's also a couple big bears there. On top of the mountain up there, though, in the game lands, there's caves and there's caverns, there's caves where some of the bears hibernate, but there's other caves in the area and stuff like that. Me personally, I think he came down off from the state game lands, honestly, probably living in one of the caves up there.
Yeah.
That's what I'm assuming.
Do you think it was following the deer down?
I would say he probably came down looking for a meal. Now, here's the part that troubles me, and I want to see what you think, okay?
Yeah.
I absolutely do not subscribe to the fact that these things sing kumbaya and play the flute with you when you meet one. Okay.
Right.
We're a food source for this animal. And what ended up happening was when I turned my neck around and I saw his leg there, and he definitely knew that I saw him, because what happened next nearly made my heart stop. The next thing I know is the thing, it growled, screamed, whatever you want to call it. It let a hell of I'm going to say it was more of a growl than a scream, but it was very loud. I could clearly hear it, even though it was windy. And this son of a bitch started shaking the shit out of the tree he was standing, behind. So I'm like, okay, I had slowly unholstered my 44 Magnum at this point. I thought, for everybody out there who's going to criticize me about this, I thought I was about to die. Right. Because there was nothing friendly about this, nothing at all. Yeah. You could tell it was highly agitated and angry. I don't know if I was supposed to be the meal. I don't know if he was going to steal one of my deer if I shot one.
Yeah.
But the deer, the food was gone, and I was the only thing left there. So I thought, honestly, in my heart, this thing was about to kill me. You know, he probably would have stole. If I shot a deer, Jeff, I think he just would have stole it and been done with it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've heard encounters where a guy was hunting, and he was posted up. He was in a small clearing, and he saw a squatch coming through, but it had a deer over its shoulders,
yeah, sure.
Maybe, like you said that you wanted my opinion. Maybe, and I'm not an expert at all, but maybe the deer were initially the dinner, and he was real upset at you, for being there, and maybe he shook the tree to get you out of there. Because I think if you were dinner for him, I don't think he would have just shook a tree. I think he would have came for you. Because I don't think they're friendly at all, and I'm with you, and I've always been this way. I don't subscribe to the fact that Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolf, whatever, are misunderstood, and they just want to be friends. I don't believe that they want to be friends, and I think that it's you're a lucky person if you get out of the woods alive if you see one.
I agree, and like I said, now he would have been hunting deer too, because he obviously didn't know these deer were going to come up the mountain either. But he was right near where deer trails intersect, just like where I planted myself. So he probably, I'm going to say he hunted there before. He probably came back to, you go with what you know and what you're comfortable with. He could have very well swiped a few deer from there, and that's it. And nobody in the hunting society ever brought it up. So here's the I think, honestly, if I wouldn't have been armed, I think I think he would have killed me, because he was going nuts. Growling. It wasn't really the scream that everybody talks about that hits you in the chest. It was just really these demonic growls. That's the only way I could, he shook the shit out of the tree. I unholstered my 44. I turned as far as I could. I actually, was at a real bad angle, but I didn't want to expose myself any more than I had to, because I felt he was going to charge me. I just turned around and I unloaded with my 44. I ripped off all 6 shots in his direction. I did not aim at him intentionally. You know, but I shot all 6 shots out of that, and I had some under buffalo bore 350 grain overloads in that thing. So those things, they probably would have taken him down if I hit him all 6 times. But again, I did not aim at him. I aimed at off to the side of him, and that was partly because I didn't want to expose myself. I didn't know what he was going to do. You know, so I didn't want to stick my head around the corner and have him pop it off my body.
Yeah.
You know, so I did that. I turned around, took a knee, reloaded my 44 Magnum, put it back in my holster. You know, I sat there with my 30-06 chambered and just listened. You know, I mean, he took off like a bat out of hell because I heard him running. I heard the carnage. Okay, at first. But then it stopped almost as quickly as it started. And again, it's very windy. Okay, and I'm in virgin forest here. So now I got to go about 100 yards back to the main logging trail through all this stuff that I'm bushwhacking through. So I'm going to be honest with you, you know, I prayed and I prayed and I prayed because I didn't think I was ever going to get out of there. You know, I had my handgun in my hand, my rifle slung over my back, and I was just trying to get through that stuff as quickly as possible. I got back to the trail. You know, I took a knee again, and I just listened to see if I could figure out where he was. Because it was so windy, Jeff, I couldn't hear anything other than when he first bolted. You know, when he first bolted, but it stopped almost right away. And I don't know if it's because he stopped. You know, maybe he was afraid I was pursuing him and was going to continue until I killed him. He might have thought that. I mean, I just unloaded a 44 Magnum toward him. Yeah. You know, I don't know if he thought he was going to get killed and he stopped to hide, but I don't know because I didn't see him after that. But I got to the logging road, or the skidder road, and like I said, it was roughly about a mile out to the main road, the trail, these are trails, I should say, that went down the mountain to the cabin. So I never ran so fast in my life. You know, I was like, I was kind of stopping and listening to see if I could hear noise. I heard some branches breaking and here and there and in the background, but again, it was so damn windy. You know, I know some of it was probably him, but, you know, it was hard to hear anything. And I just was happy I wasn't hearing, you know, a 1,000-pound bowling ball running through the woods next to me. Yeah. You know, because I was like, that's why I had my 44 Magnum out and my rifle slung over my back, because I figured he's going to ambush me on this trail. The handgun's going to be much better weapon of choice, you know, if that happens. Yeah. So thank God I got out to the main trail where the meadow was at, and I ran down the hill the rest of the way. I had a little bit of a breather right there. But in the meantime, we all have walkie-talkies. Everybody had to have a radio, or you weren't allowed to hunt. You had to have a radio. So, you know, I ripped all those shots off, and the next thing you know, everybody and his brother is keying my radio, you know. Right. So my uncle's like, Mike, are you okay? What's going on? Hey, did you get, you know, everyone's like, hey, did you get the deer? You know, did you get him? Did you get him? We heard the shots. And I'm like, no, I missed, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I just said, Uncle Ray, I'll talk to you when I get back. When you come back down to the cabin, right? And I shut it off because I figured I don't want him honing in on me if he's going to hear that, you know? Yeah. So I got back to, like I said, the meadow, and I ran down back to the cabin. All the old timers were in there, you know, telling their war stories, you know, they did all the cooking and the cleaning, and, you know, and I got back in there, and they're like, man, what was all the shooting? Did you get your deer? Blah, blah, blah. Jeff, I was so angry at this point. I said, you know, I just looked at these guys and I said, no. I said, I didn't get a deer. I said, how long have you, I don't want to keep using profanity, and I forgot about you. This is going to be on your I apologize for the swearing. Yeah. It just brings out emotion, you know, the emotions in me. But I was like, how long have you guys known about this thing? And they're just looking at me like, what are you talking about? I said, don't give me that stupid look on your face. You know, how long have you guys known that freaking thing has been living up on the mountain up there? And I said, I just had a run-in with that thing, and I don't think I would have made it out of there alive. Okay? The deer was probably going to take. I ended up chasing away by accident.
Yeah.
Okay? I shot it one, missed it. This thing is right behind me, roughly about 30 feet, and it's growling at me. It's shaking the tree. I mean, Jeff, the shadow, I could see somewhat of a shadow outline in the tree from this thing, from where he was standing. I can't even imagine how tall this thing was. Like I said, his knee was above my head. I'm 5'10", so when I'm sitting on the ground, you know, I mean, I don't know. I would say he was at least 10 feet tall.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and he was probably every bit of 1,000 pounds. I mean, like I said, that leg of his looked like it was as big as the tree trunk.
I don't mean to cut you off, but we are definitely coming up on recording time. Did they say anything to you after that? Did they?
No, they all laughed and smiled and stared at each other. Okay. I knew, and I said, and don't act, you know, and I said, and don't act like you guys don't know what I'm talking about. I said, you know, I thought I was going to lose my life up there today.
Right.
And then finally one of them said, listen, it's never hurt anybody. It's never killed anybody. You know, just don't shoot at it again or try and kill it. You know, it's been here since the association started. So one of them finally cracked and told me, but don't say a word. I'll deny everything I just said to you. Keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
So I have not been hunting since then, Jeff.
That should be a rule. You know, that should be one of their rules to just, if you're going to be a member of that, they tell you up front, but it's got to be kept, you know, what stays at, you know, I always, at hunting camp, it was what happens at hunting camp stays at hunting camp, you know?
Yeah. So. Well, and they said he came down off the mountain. They said, oh, he lives in one of the cavern caves up in state game land. He comes down off the mountain looking for food. You know, he never hurt anybody. He goes, just don't shoot at it again, you know?
Right.
You know, well, thanks for telling me as an afterthought, you know?
Yeah. Listen, I just want to make sure that I don't mean to cut you, but
sure.
We do got to end, because I only got about an hour and a half recording time, and we're about 3 minutes short. Do you want to say anything before we end the upload?
I want to thank you, Jeff, for being brave and courageous and having a platform for people like us to get this stuff off our chest, because it helps a lot to talk about it. And if anybody out there has an experience, please do yourself a favor. Don't hold it in. I know personally what it's like to suffer from PTSD from these things, because I was trying to convince myself I didn't believe what I actually saw, and just meet it head on, read about it, learn about it, and you'll be able to deal with it much better. It's helped me immensely by talking about it.
Right on. Do me a favor. Don't hang up. I want to talk to you for a few minutes after.
Sure.
All right.
All right, folks, there you have it. I hope you all enjoyed this bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps this channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events, well, they've happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.